Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to this week's Q&A. I'm using the old mic this time because I'm already all mic'd up from shooting the Jag SD video, so I figured I would just continue right on and start shooting the Q&As this week. So, I don't know, anybody that's into the mic comparison stuff can hear the difference between this week and last week or something. But anyway, let's jump right into the Q&As. First up, Firebrand X chimed in regards to the conversation last week about trying to make GDI images smaller so you could fit more on a disk or on an SD card. Last week I said, just my own personal opinion, that I'd be afraid to touch them. I would just want to leave them alone and just buy a bigger SD card. But Firebrand X did have a bunch of great advice. He said, on the GDI images, there's a set of utilities you can use to truncate them, and all this does is remove the unused portions of the disk so you don't lose any quality. Think of it like FLAC format for audio. Now there's always the caveat about it not being compatible with some hardware or emulators, but he's found the majority of games work fine on GDEMU. If anybody's interested, he has a tool set that he used to do so, and he also posted a tool for auto sorting and naming for an SD card called SD Card Maker. So thanks very much, FBX, for chiming in. To be perfectly honest, unless somebody like FBX or like a lot of like Beast is another one that rips his own games and makes sure everything is absolutely perfect, unless it came from somebody like that, or unless I took the time to really do it myself, I would only use just the basic uncompressed one, only because I'm paranoid of that, and the rare moments I have these days to actually sit down and really play a game, I would be very upset if I got a few hours into it and something glitched out because of a bad rip or a compression or something. So I guess unless you're doing it yourself the way Firebrand X explained, or unless it's coming from somebody that you really know did it right, I'd still just rip the whole thing and use it. But once again, only my opinion, and there's obviously lots of choices. Kelly Greenidge had two questions, and I guess my opinion might be a little bit biased on the answers, but I'm just going to say it anyway. First and foremost, do I or someone in the chat know if his mini Hydra switch is safe to use, let's just say? And the only way to know for sure is to set it up with some kind of oscilloscope and measure the voltage outputs. I measured the original Hydra, and with the sync stripper on, it puts out about a volt, which should be just on that line of safe to use with the OSSC, which then of course would mean, yes, fine, totally fine to use with your OLED and all that stuff. I've had bad luck with Hydras in the past, and there was just some stuff that happened years ago where I just have a gut feeling of I just don't like using them. The one that really freaked me out is a friend of mine sent me a video he took with his cell phone of he had a couple consoles, all of which were powered off, plugged into his original Hydra, hooked up to his really mint BVM, and you just see crazy horizontal interference shooting across the BVM until he unplugged the Hydra and then it went away. So I don't know if that was one Hydra that was defective, which, it happens, but there's just, you put everything I know together, and Hydras always make me pause, and I'm always careful around them. The other side of the second question you had, what's the difference of the new Gscart switch versus the Hydra 2? Tons of difference. So you never have to worry about safety with the Gscarts. You never really have had to. You certainly don't now. Of course, when I say safety, I'm talking about the output. If you put in a bunch of crap, who knows, you might kill the Gscart, whatever. But if you're just using good cables, you never have to worry about the output. And the sync regeneration is something that not everybody's going to use, but if you ever need it, it's so awesome that all you have to do is flip a dip switch and you're good. So right now, this affects Sega Master System the most, I think. But there's other scenarios in which it might help. It really just depends on your overall setup. And I know the research and I know all the development that went into the Gscart. So once again, I'm a little bit biased just because I saw all the effort that went into this, and I know how hard Super G tried to make this a flawless product. So my vote is always going to be for the Gscart for all of those reasons, plus a bunch of others I don't want to drag out. But it's just, Yeah, I mean, my suggestion is if you already have a Hydra that seems to be working fine, it's always really cool if you double check stuff on a scope. I know most of us probably don't want to deal with that, but maybe your friends have a scope or something. There's never going to be a negative end to you double checking something. But if you don't already own one, I would say Gscart. So once again, it's my biased opinion, but there's certainly reasons for my bias in this. Samson Wick says that he has a Sony TV that's been performing great with low input latency and is compatible with every mode of the OSSC, but he's looking to upgrade and wants to know if there's any TVs out there that any of us know about that might stand out. As far as affordable TVs, the LG and the TCL still stand out for me. You get what you pay for. You're still going to get a little bit of motion blur. It's not the best TV you've ever seen. You can see gray areas in the backlight. But if you take price into consideration, suddenly they become awesome TVs, at least my opinion. Of course, you could always go straight to something like one of the newer OLEDs that only has about a frame of lag and looks ridiculous, but now you're dropping at least a couple of grand on that. And there's not too many in the middle that I have personally found. There's lots of friends out there that say they found TVs that are amazing. One that stands out is a Samsung TV that's I think it's like $1,400 or something like that. The people say performs great, low latency, compatible, and it's a happy middle ground between a cheap TCL and an expensive OLED. But I don't have really any hands-on experience with the middle grade stuff. And I try to always go one way or the other. Like, I have no problem just buying something cheap, knowing that it's a cheap thing as long as it performs good enough. And I usually tend to save my money and try to save up for something that's more on the higher end. Or more specifically, I save up till I stumble across an amazing deal on one of the higher end things, which I've, for some insane reason, always been able to do. Whether it was the Luva CRTs or the Panasonic Plasma or this OLED, I was just at the right place at the right time and was able to buy one. So I don't know, but hopefully anybody else here that has any suggestions, please post and let Samson know. But that's really my opinion on it. The TCL and the LG performed great, or go for a crazy OLED if you want to go with an insane new TV. Clint Collage asked, are there any good resources for beginners looking to get into the arcade side of the retro gaming hobby? Basically, he picked up an MV1C, a Neo Geo MVS board, and wants to get started and was hoping for a step-by-step guide like some of the ones I'd written on Retro RGB. And unfortunately, I don't know of a website that has that, and I haven't had time to touch that yet. And one of the main reasons I've put it off, well, the main reason is just time, but one of the next main reasons is because at the end of the day, no matter what you do with an arcade board, if you really want to be safe and you want to make sure that all of your equipment is safe to use with it, you're going to need an oscilloscope. I believe one of those cheap $100 ones should perform perfectly. I don't think you'd need to go crazy, but you'd need to be able to double check that RGB and sync are the correct voltages for your equipment, as well as both audio channels. And all that's really important because that's the main reason that OSSCs and Gscarts have blown out, were people that that tried their best but didn't quite know the best way to use this stuff. So my only advice for now is pick up a Haas. And if it's a used one, make sure that the person didn't change any of the dip switch settings. Really read the manual. Read the manual either way, but if it's a used one, double and triple check everything. If it's a new one, you should generally be safe just plugging it in and going. But there's just so much more involved on the arcade side of things. And I would love to do a guide on it, but at the end of the day, if you're really worried about it, definitely get a scope to double check everything. MC Boys chimed in on this as well, and it's the same thing. If you're getting a minigun, you should be fine, but it's really best to double check, especially depending on the cables you're using and everything else. It's not nearly as straightforward as buy a Super Nintendo, buy a cable from one of the main sellers, plug it in, and you're done. And it'll never be that simple. So I'll jump into that as soon as I can. As far as things like controller adapters, MC Cthulhu versus Brook Retro, the one thing I absolutely recommend, if you have the ability to, and if you don't mind, I would wire every one of your arcade sticks with a DB15 connector so that you don't need to worry about converters. You could just plug it directly into your supergun, and it's essentially just an on-off switch. So it's impossible to have delay at that point. So, but I mean, that's a lot of work. Now you have to mod each and every one of your consoles, or arcade sticks, not consoles, sorry. And you have to wire it up, and then you have to compensate for wiring for different things like CPS2 versus Mortal Kombat. So for most people, buying just one of those converters might be better, especially because you could just use your arcade stick. But both the MC Cthulhu and Brook Retro work great. The undammed decoders are phenomenal. But that's another thing I would really need to walk people through. So maybe I'll have like a tree of getting started with arcade stuff and walk people through arcade boards, voltage, controller adapters, but that's going to be a full-time project. So hopefully I'll get around to that someday. And also, you asked if I had ever tried a certain microphone amp that's designed to eliminate background noise. I haven't for my particular setup. The Behringer I have seems to be okay. I'll certainly try that one if I can in the future. One thing that I would like to practice a lot more on is for the bigger the bigger production videos, or even things like the Jag SD video, which isn't a giant production, but it's still me with a lav mic and not as much noise reduction. I'd like to try the software side of noise reduction. Now, just having music playing in the background is probably the best you can get, because my voice is still clear and the music covers up a lot of the background noise. Probably not like the motor revving that we just heard a minute ago in this section, but certainly enough where if I could just record in a relatively quiet area, then it would be okay. But I'll absolutely archive that. I'll watch the video and I'll check it out. And if anybody has really good tutorials on how to use the software side on Premiere, the ones I've seen they aren't really user friendly. They try to make it out to be, but on top of that, every version of Premiere has slightly different changes in it, so it doesn't look exactly like some of the videos. So I'll try to get to that at some point as well. But from the hardware end, I will totally look into anything you've got, but I think I got a decent enough setup at the moment. But thank you very much for the suggestions, and keep them coming. Cam had a couple of great questions. First, he recently purchased a Sony BVM-20E1U. Awesome. If you ever go to sell that, call me first. I love those. And he's in the market for a Gscart to BNC cable and wants to know if he has to get one with an integrated sync stripper. No, the opposite. You definitely do not want a sync stripper. You just want a pass-through. This is a couple of reasons. First of all, it wouldn't hurt it at all, but every sync stripper you add could possibly shift the image over just a hair, which isn't a big deal, but just overall, the less you can mess with an analog signal, the better. And also, you said that you have a Gscart switch, so you really wouldn't need any kind of processing at all. That takes care of anything that you would need. So just buy whichever Gscart to BNC cable you've got and go from there. And the other question was pretty good in that, is there any difference in audio output quality based on the audio outputs offered in those cables? So Gscart to BNC with audio breakout on 3.5 millimeter or RCA. The quality should be pretty much identical. I think that's really just ease of use in what your setup is going into. So I think I have RCA on mine just because it makes it easier, and I have a ton of adapters that could change that to a few different things. But if you already have a specific setup, then I would just use whatever that requires to make it easier. Generally, the cable manufacturers use very high-end shielded cable no matter what the audio is. So just pick whichever one fits your setup the best. Cam had one more question. Can you recommend a good Bluetooth audio transmitter for use with retro gaming? No. And in fact, I've never found a good Bluetooth transmitter ever. So if anybody has one that I could just plug into my PC, I would love to try one out. I think I've bought, over the past years, I've bought at least 10 of them. And all have, not only is the audio quality not that great, there's a significant delay, more so than you would expect from Bluetooth. And on top of all of that, the range is terrible, to the point where even in the standing desk setup that I have, the mouse to the computer is too far for the Bluetooth. And I know I live in like the interference capital of the planet here. I think the only places other than right where I live that would be worse are like Hong Kong or something. But I do have a special use scenario here. But still, I haven't found a Bluetooth audio transmitter that I would trust. So anybody that has a great connection, please let me know. But for now, I would absolutely just use a wired connection and hope for the best, because I just get audio dropouts all the time, and my mouse isn't even usable. So I stopped using them. I gave away all the adapters I had and don't even really have any Bluetooth equipment anymore. Unmaker had a question regarding triple bypass installations. He said he's done quite a few and a lot of them have come out perfect, but when he did one specific revision Model 2, I believe the VA 2.3, the audio results weren't that good, and he wanted to know if I had any thoughts on that. So first and foremost, we tried to get through every motherboard revision of Genesis, but at the time where we went through all of these, the MD Fourier project didn't exist. So we had to do everything by ear, and we were serious about it. We didn't just like listen from a PVM speaker and go, oh, it's fine. Like, we did our due diligence here, but we didn't have a scientific method of testing. So it's possible that we got the BOM wrong. It's also possible if you built your own board. I'm not sure if you ordered one or if you had built your own by hand, but anybody who builds their own by hand could potentially use wrong components. I made that mistake, so I'm certainly not looking down on anybody who does that. But generally speaking, the triple bypass version 1 is very close to perfect, but not quite perfect. The great news, though, is with the MD Fourier project, it can be. And the triple bypass version 2 that'll be released fairly soon, I hope, it should be perfect on every rev. We're trying to go back and test on every one, but the good news for both is all you need to do is switch out a couple components. And we should have some documentation on that soon. If you'd like to try yourself, you're obviously encouraged to help and post your results. But that's the one thing that I'm very happy with, and that we were very, very careful of, is that the triple bypass version 2 is the exact same quality. It's just set up for people to make it easier for people to stock it. There's only one version that works with all of the models of Genesis. So while technically speaking, you could say that if you put on a version 2, the audio sounds better, all you would have to do is change, I believe, 3 resistors on the original triple bypass board, and it should be identical. Now, once again, we're double and triple checking everything. We also double and triple checked the video, so it's equal to the version 1. All of this rearranging of the components didn't mess with the video at all. So yeah, it stinks. I mean, I wish everything could be perfect the first time around, but any early adopters should understand that you're an early adopter, and that's one of the main reasons I didn't do a big fancy video about the triple bypass, and didn't blow it up outside of our inner circle of nerds here, because it just wasn't quite ready for everybody. And I think the number one complaint I had was that there had to be different versions of the board pre-populated. So now that we have everything solved, we should be ready. It should be going to production soon. I think we're just checking the BOM for a bunch of others. But if for whatever reason this next batch isn't 100% perfect, we'll figure out the components, and version 2.5 will have that tweaked. But no matter what, all you'll ever need to do is change a few components on it, just a few resistors. There aren't any gigantic major changes. We're not using a different video amp. We're not going crazy with anything else. Although I'm kind of hoping that a few people on the team will make their own specialized versions for insane audio files that hear every 0.001% difference in audio. There are people like that out there. I'm not quite there. I can tell the difference sometimes, but it doesn't bother me as much as long as you're already at that level. But yeah, if you have a very discerning ear, I'm hoping by this time next year, you'll be able to buy the main version, which is perfect for 99.99% of the people out there, and you'll be able to buy the audiophile editions, which are perfect for people that want to know that they have the audiophile edition. But other than that, yeah. So I'm sorry for the trouble, I guess contact anybody on the Discord here and see if anybody knows of the fix for the VA 2.3, and we'll see what we could do. But overall, it should just be changing a couple of resistors, unless you have some serious issue like bad ground noise or a hum or something like that. If it's just levels and stuff, it should just be a few resistors. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much to everybody who participates in these. And anybody who's a newcomer to these, post your question anywhere that you found this video. So subscribe to our Patreon, Bitbacker, right on YouTube itself. Doesn't really matter where you found it. Any question at all that you have, just find the newest Q&A video and post your question there. The way things work, I can't really go back and figure out which are the new questions from older ones. So I'm very sorry if I missed your question or anything like that. Please just re-ask it and I'll get to it as soon as I can, hopefully by the next Q&A. And once again, ask anything you'd like. I'll try my best to get to everybody's. So thank you so much for all your support, and I'll see you next time.